Okay, this is the last session that I'm moderating, and I'm very happy that it is with Mythical, which was my first investment in the NFT meets gaming space back in 2019. If anyone went to the party the other night, it was amazing with Chainsmokers and Questlove. But I'm very excited to introduce Sebastiano Bea, who is the head of product at Mythical, and I'll turn it over to him to take it away. Thanks.
Thanks, Angela. Good afternoon, everyone. I have had the pleasure to speak with some of you today and yesterday, so I know there's some great game experts, there's some great blockchain experts, and there's also someone who's newer to their space, so we're going to try to keep it interesting for everyone today. We're going to talk about the anatomy of play, own, earn games, and why play, own, earn is a good framework to characterize experiences of blockchain games. How did we get here? Most of us started in traditional Web 2 games, where the focus was really the game and having fun. Then entered blockchain, and it became play to earn, where the game wasn't that important, it was really about the money. We figured out that was not going to last long, and so we started pivoting to play and earn, where the game came back into importance, the ability to have fun. Today, we're going to talk about play, own, earn, and why the ownership aspect is also a really key part of the gamer experience in Web3 games. First of all, let's start with play, and each of these words is associated to a component of a blockchain game. Playing is associated with the game itself. Important part. Unfortunately, adding blockchain technologies to a bad game does not make it a better game. The gaming aspect is what gives utility to the assets inside the game. Finally, I can do something with my NFT, with my digital assets. I can use them inside the game, whether for social accountability or for actual utility in game mechanics. Secondly, own is associated to blockchain technologies. And blockchain technologies enable verifiable scarcity, verifiable ownership, and true ownership. And we'll get into the meaning of that in just a second. Finally, earn is associated to marketplaces. And that's how my assets, which I own on a blockchain and I can use in a game, get value and get their value recognized by the community. It also empowers player, brands, and games itself to own and share the economy inside the game. But first of all, this talk is brought to you by Mythical Games. We are a next-generation game and technology company looking to usher this next generations of games to the mass market. And we do that through brands, because we think it's good. A problem that's been mentioned is the onboarding of new users, and we want to usher traditional players into this next generation through brands and partnerships which they know. Which is why this week we announced 3 new games which are going to come to the Mythical platform, which is our technology stack, which enables seamless integration of traditional games with blockchain technologies. The first one is NFL Rivals, with a big brand like NFL. The second one is Nitro Nation World Tour with our friends at Nitro Nations, a car racing game. And the third one, Epic Spell Wars Magic Fight with our friends at Cryptozoic. But most importantly, we have one game which has been live for the past year and a half with NFTs in them. And today we'll have some insights from it. The game is Blanco's Block Party, and meet Billy, who's our mascot and NFT that you can own today on Blanco's Block Party. We'll get some great insights from Billy today. And let's start specifically with Blanco's, looking into play, own, and earn. So Blanco's, first of all, is a game with a lot of races, challenges, fights, brawls, and there's going to be someone from the Blanco's team outside later if you want to learn more about it. By playing these races, challenges with your NFTs, that are on Blanco's blockchain. And that's where the ownership aspects come in. We opted for our own blockchain because of scalability issues and a lot of other things that have been talked about in this conference. However, we have a bridge to Ethereum, and we're going to talk about bridging and true ownership and what that means for the players. And finally, since last year, just over a year ago, we launched the Blanco's Marketplace, where players are able to trade their Blancos between each others in a fairly seamless experience, both crypto and fiat, because we want to be open to all kinds of users. Let's get back on track and tackle the play aspect, dig a little deeper in there. And with this next slide, I don't want to be offensive to anyone. There's a lot of game experts here. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to keep it really easy. All games are characterized by a gaming loop, and there's very complex and incredibly amazing mechanics which plenty of us here have developed in the past. To keep it easy, a game loop can be very simplified through action, something that you do inside the game, reward, something that you get for doing those actions, and then progress. Now, this cycle can be very fun and very engaging if it's done well. However, it is limited to the game itself, which leads, in some cases, to a sense of guilt in the gamers, with the fact that your resources and your time that you put in the game is stuck to the game itself. Once you get bored of the game, or if the game ever decides to shut down, all your effort and time and resources spent in the game stay there. With blockchain, the loop is still there. You still need to have a good gaming loop. However, the action leads to added value. And the value isn't necessarily tied to your player identity. It could be tied to an asset, something that lives on after the game and maybe even after you. And finally, this added value to assets leads to progress inside the game, but also enables you to trade and interface with the rest of the gaming ecosystem outside of the game itself. If we have time at the end, we'll also cover the ecosystem aspect. So finally, value can circulate between games, and you as a gamer can build value not just for the game and for yourself, but for the entire community. How does this decline in the Blankos block party? Let's take a race, for example. There's races, you can race with your friends. So there's a social aspect, racing with your friends. But then this also allows you to level up your Blankos. You don't level up yourself as an individual, you level up your NFT. You can also earn more NFTs in particular cases, in particular party passes, but I won't get into too much of that today. Let's keep it simple. You can level up your Blankos, and you can also apply unique customizations in colors to it. So you can take an asset, which is limited, but is maybe not unique, and make it yours, make it unique, evolve it so that the work you put into that asset is really unique and one of one. And then you can trade it for other Blankos to the rest of the community or just showcase it. And this takes us to one challenge which has been today with the technology underlying games, and is that game assets are not just traditional collectibles. There's some amazing art which has been showcased in this conference today, but that's kind of static art. It could be generative, there could be an algorithm behind it, but it kind of never changes. You buy it and it stays like that. You trade it and it stays like that. Game assets are unique because it enables a user to actually put value inside the asset, and the asset evolves in time. However, the technology today of ERC 721s, ERC 1155s, and equivalents on other chains is not really built to provide that easy evolution, especially in a decentralized way. That's something where if you're working on something in the space, I'd like to hear more about you, because we need to find a way to move on to the next generation of NFTs for gaming. Now let's jump into the own aspect. Whereas play says to a game, own stands to blockchain technologies. Before blockchain technologies, ownership of assets was really limited to the game itself. You were done with the game, and your game assets were done with you. Not a great ROI for the time and resources you spent in there. What does blockchain technology really enable? And there's three fairly simple concepts that we can tackle today. Obviously, there's a lot more to blockchain technologies themselves. The first one is verifiable scarcity. The value of assets and the uniqueness of the assets is linked to their scarcity inside games. And as Mythical, we believe that verifiable scarcity of asset is what makes the gaming experience unique. However, blockchain technologies enable you to enforce their scarcity inside the chain so that the gamer can establish a trustless relationship with the game itself and doesn't have to rely on a centralized party. There's a lot of projects which do this already amazingly today, but there's also a lot of projects which actually don't use this asset of the blockchain and just put NFTs on chain without enforcing this scarcity on the chain. Second is verifiable ownership, the fact that there is a source of truth which is not the game itself. We're in the industry, and we know sometimes things go badly or there's downtimes. The fact that now there's a decentralized system where I can go and check the ownership of my assets, and something that lives on also outside of the game is a unique thing that blockchain technologies brings to games. Thirdly, true ownership. And this is the fact that I, as a user, can own an asset inside the game, but I can do whatever I want with it, even outside of the game. And this is what unlinks and opens up possibilities for interoperability, and bridges between chains. Today, this is the first piece of information that I can give you from Blanco's block parties. Approximately at the start of this year, we launched our bridge from our Blanco's chain to Ethereum mainnet. However, we didn't do that all in one go. We slowly phased in assets and enrolled assets in this service. And what we found is that assets which had access to the bridge and so had more true ownership compared to other assets would trade at a 12% average higher price and with around a 30% increased volume. We think that's how the community is recognizing the value of true ownership and how they're showing us that yes, assets for which they have true ownership actually are valued more than assets that don't. Happy to talk more about this later. I'll be outside. Let's get into the third aspect, which is earn. And earn is associated to marketplaces. Why are marketplaces so important for a game? Marketplaces actually allow the community to show how much they think that assets in-game are worth, and they can prove the value of an asset to you. Some gamers might have some very unique assets they've been working on for a long time and might not completely be aware of the value that the assets represent to the community. Marketplaces allows this price discovery and this value. Without marketplaces, the game is still good, you still own assets, however, these assets don't really have a value because you don't have a way to showcase that. And marketplaces doesn't just mean it has to be an embedded marketplace, it could be a third-party marketplace, part of a composable blockchain ecosystem. We also ran an experiment here. A year ago, we launched the mythical marketplace for Blancos. And we noticed that after we introduced the marketplace, people had a free X spend inside Blancos themselves. This was not specifically just on NFTs in the game in general. And there was also an increase in game user sessions. Adding the marketplace to a game caused players to be more engaged with it. And this is the aspect of earn, the fact that suddenly there was value and it was recognized. Before blockchain technologies, it was still possible to trade game assets in gray markets. However, the experience was terrible and relegated to a very small niche of users. Now everybody can take advantage and understand what the value of assets is inside games. Let's recap a little bit, a very simplistic player journey inside a play, own, earn game. First of all, there's the game itself. The player comes in and plays. They can have assets and evolve the assets to increase, to some extent, the scarcity of the asset and the uniqueness of the assets. They can verify that the asset is theirs, that the asset is scarce inside the blockchain, and potentially they can bridge it out to other ecosystems and do whatever they want with it. And finally, through marketplaces, they can actually see what the value of their assets is and understand what value they have created. If I take each of these and I remove it, I take away part of the experience. Without a game, there's no utility for the assets, and it's just a collectible NFT. Not saying that that's bad, but simply you lose a big aspect of the experience. If I take blockchain technologies, then you don't really have that true ownership, and users, as we've seen, don't value that as much. It's not as a great experience for them. And finally, without marketplaces, I don't really know what the value of my assets is. I have them, I can use them in the game, but that's where the experience ends. Let's talk now more about ecosystem. So I have one game. What if I have multiple games that suddenly, through bridges and interoperability, can talk between each other? And this is also what Mythical is going to aspire to in the future. There are some things that carry over suddenly from game to game. You don't have to restart the experience every time. You don't have to re-engage with each game as a newbie. All the carryovers can be divided into two parts. One is your global identity. Your wallet enables you to connect to different games, and your identity passes over to the games with, as much as you decide to disclose, ideally, through the wallet. Your assets also carry over, so some games might decide to build on assets from other games, from other IPs, even from potentially outside of the gaming world. And then your earnings, which you get in a game, or your added value of a game can translate to another game if the game's designed it appropriately. Then your game level profiles, the actually things you have developed and you have the bonds you have created inside the game can carry over to other games too. Thank you for your attention today. I'm Sebastiano Bea from Mythical. I'll be waiting outside in case you have any questions. Happy to engage with the community. And just for you, we have a unique Blancos NFT, which I can hand you outside to get started in the game in case you're not in the game itself. Thank you, and see you around.